Angels, messengers of God and guides to humans. Are they divine, or could there be another explanation for them? Some say that the Bible is evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. Could the description of wings just be misinterpreted jetpacks? Stay tuned to find out the answers to these questions and more. Hi, hello, and welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we examine the TV show Ancient Aliens. Do the claims hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? I'm your host Fredrik, and this is episode 14, and we are going biblical. To help us stay on the path of righteousness, we will be joined by Dr. Tine Rassalle. We will learn the true meaning of angels and if the true meaning of the word itself should really be written alien. Remember that you can find sources, resources and reading suggestions on our website, diggingupancientaliens.com. There you will also be able to find contact info if you notice any mistakes or have any suggestions. And if you like the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you left one of those fancy 5-star reviews that I heard so much about. Well, enough of me jammering. Let's open up this book and try to avoid being turned into salt pillars. And then I want to welcome Dr. Tine Rassalle to the show. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, would you mind maybe introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So hi, my name is Tine, and I am a biblical archaeologist. That means that I study the material culture of ancient Judaism and early Christianity in the Middle East. So I specialize in excavating and then reporting and researching objects and architecture that was produced by ancient Jews, so Bronze Age, Iron Age, around 1200 BCE before Christ, in the Middle East, Syria, Palestine, and all the way through early Christianity, the early Christians in the Middle East, let's say until the end of the 7th century, early Byzantine period. That's what I do.
All right. And do you want to share maybe your credentials? Where did you study?
Sure. So I'm originally from Belgium, as you can hear in my beautiful Dutch accent. And I have a bachelor's and a master's in archaeology of the ancient Near East from Ghent University in Belgium. And then I also have another bachelor in Hebrew and Aramaic languages from Leiden University in the Netherlands. I worked for a couple of years in museums in the Netherlands. And then I moved to the US in 2014. To get a doctoral degree, a PhD at the University of North Carolina in biblical archaeology, so ancient Mediterranean religions and archaeology. And I just graduated in December, so I'm a newly minted PhD. And now I'm looking for a job, basically. But I've been excavating for 20 years in the Middle East, and I've worked at different museums in the world. So I like to think that I know a little bit about what the topic of this episode was.
Amazing. So if you have a job for Tina, you can just send her an email.
Please, you can find me on Twitter. I'm the only one in the world with my name. So the moment you Google me, you find everything I've ever done is on the internet, which, has its upsides and its downsides. But I'm very easy to find on the internet. So if you ever want to find me, I have a website and I'm on Twitch and I'm on Discord with my name. So I should be very easily to be tracked down. And you can just give me a job. I would love that.
Yes. A lot of patience, as you will notice during this episode. Do you want to tell the audience what we watched?
Yes. So we watched episode 7 of season 2 of Ancient Aliens, which was titled Angels and Aliens. So it was an episode Oh, wow. It was a whirlwind. It was an episode about how angels, who we know from the Hebrew Bible, so from the Old Testament and the New Testament and some other biblical sources, um, how they could have been perhaps aliens who have visited our planet in the past. And we just misinterpreted these whole stories, all these biblical stories. We are completely wrong. They were not some messengers sent by God, but they were in fact little gray aliens visiting us. That was the episode.
You summarize it very shortly and somehow totally correct. That's it. Bye, everybody. No, but have you encountered any of these claims previously, either the ancient alien phenomenon itself or what they have brought up? Is it something they teach you in biblical archaeology school?
No, I can honestly say that that was the first time I ever heard that kind of interpretation. And I've heard some wild stories, but that was definitely a new one. I hadn't really watched much Ancient Aliens. Of course, I know of it and I know the phenomenon. Um, and my husband he loves to put on Ancient Aliens when I'm not paying attention, and then plays this game where he counts down the minutes, how long it takes me to actually realize that we're watching Ancient Aliens. All of a sudden, I hear something in the background, and I'm like, "What are you watching?" And then he's like, it's Ancient Aliens. I'm like, "Oh, come on." So that's about as far as my knowledge of the show went before I watched this episode. This was the first time that I actually really sat down, watched an episode from beginning to end, paused it, took notes, did my research. I never put that much effort in it. And yeah, those claims, those were all definitely very new to me.
They were wild, but how about we start to dig into them, so to say? So I just want to bring up quickly they have usually these highlight intros where they, take snippets from the episode and, catching your attention. And we have a Jason Martell, who is quite familiar to regular viewers or listeners, who brings up, I don't believe that they had wings. And I've written, I'm sure he's going for a jetpack later. And we will see if I'm right there. But after the very epic intro, we open up on a O'Nielsen survey. Of course, it's 10 years old by now, but it's saying something like 7 out of 10 Americans believe in angels, yada yada.
Which really surprised me. Like, really, 7 out of 10 people in the US believe in angels? And I actually looked it up because you said indeed the survey is 10 years old. So I looked it up on the internet to try to find some figures that are a little bit more modern. But it's still the same. The latest surveys that I read still said 7 or 8 out of 10 Americans, and Europe a little bit lower, but still 4 or 5 out of 10 in Europe, which I still thought was higher than I expected it. But then I thought about it. If I would ask my parents, for example, my mom, do you believe in angels? I think she would say no. But then on the other hand, like, her father passed away, my grandfather, and I do believe that sometimes she will say, like, oh, grandfather watches over us, or, he has stopped me from doing this thing that, might have been dangerous, sort of like a guardian angel. And I thought about it in that way. I'm like, okay, if we talk about it in that way, how like loved ones who have passed away are still kind of like taking care of you or watching over you, then I could see that. That seems a little bit different than, some alien or some angel visiting you on a Saturday afternoon and then comes over for a cup of coffee. Seems a little bit of a different concept. So maybe that whole loved ones hanging over you idea would be closer to what I indeed could see people believing in.
Yeah, it's all about how you ask the question. I'm not that surprised about American numbers, since America is quite Christian nation in a sense, but again, it's how you phrase the question. Is it a fire, brimstone, flaming sword kind of angel, or the more fluffy spiritual guardian angels? Oh, Granny is looking over us from heaven with the cat and the turtle that got lost a few summers ago.
Or maybe they believe in like these angels that will come at the end of time, right? That are not really like coming to our planet right now, but maybe when the apocalypse happens, there will be angels. Something like that, perhaps. I don't know. You should ask him. I have no idea.
And we have Folko, who is introducing herself to that angels are in all cultures, at least Mediterranean cultures. I'm not super familiar with that, but sure, I think the Greek have different messengers, the Babylonians have, or Assyrians definitely had, and of course messengers in Hebrew. And then you bring up Malak, or is it the show too?
That one made me giggle. So at some point they're like, okay, so clearly the English word angel does not appear in the Hebrew Bible, right? The Hebrew Bible was written in Hebrew. But the word that they use in Hebrew is malach, which means messenger. Like an angel is a messenger who brings a sort of intermediary figure between God and people, who brings messages from God. Which, yeah, I could understand. And then later, when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek in the Septuagint, that became angelos, and that is where we get the angel word from. And angelos is also kind of a messenger, the Greek translation of it. But what made me laugh is at some point they show the Hebrew word malach in big letters on the screen in Hebrew script, but they write it from left to right. Like Hebrew is written from right to left. And I kind of assume that most people know that. And that if you open up a Hebrew Bible, that's how you would see the word. So I have no idea why all of a sudden they show the Hebrew word and they write it from left to right. I mean, either you can read Hebrew and you clearly see that that is not how you write the word, or you cannot read Hebrew and then you just see some signs, so it doesn't matter what direction the letters are in, you can't read it anyway. So what's the whole point of mirroring this word?
Because the audience don't know.
But if the audience wouldn't know, then they can't read it anyway. So I was at that point I was already like, okay, if you don't even know the writing, like the direction of the word, how am I going to trust the rest of this episode? Like you already have your basics wrong.
This is the attention to details that ancient alienists are known to have.
I mean, at least have someone look over if you're going to do a topic on the Bible, have a biblical scholar. You know, there's also conservative biblical scholars and creationist biblical scholars that you can invite. Have them look over your episode and point out details like that. I mean, come on. It's basic due diligence, I thought. Okay.
And then the whole thing here is to say that people don't really talk with God in the Old Testament. I think their main goal is to say that the angels are who they speak with to speak with God, but at the same time forgetting about Moses, who, as I remember, clearly spoke with God. But it wasn't that on the mountains, or was that also through something else?
Oh, I think it was just a voice that came. I don't know. Yeah, I guess if a voice can come down, then a voice could come down at any time. Yeah, I don't know why you would need angels then. That's a good point. I don't know.
Then we have my favorite character, Bill Barnes. He claims that angels are not from Earth, so therefore they are ETs.
Right. So that's the first claim that he makes, right? So he says, okay, so angels are not from this planet. They are not from this earth. So they're extraterrestrial. So they're ATs, they're ETs. And so he says our modern concept of angels and ETs are the same. And I was like, are our concepts of angels and ETs the same? If I think about an ET, like an extraterrestrial being who lives on a planet somewhere, I don't think that's the same as aliens or angels who are these more spiritual beings or don't have an actual body or live in heaven. Or you're not gonna find a planet of angels somewhere living in our universe. I don't think you can say that's the same concept in our modern eyes. I don't think it is. That was also, they make a lot of these statements that they just put out as statements. It is that way. And every time it was like, but is it that way? You can't just say something and then we're all gonna accept it as truth just because you say it. Is it? I have my doubts.
Yeah, but that's, as you will know by now, it's kind of how they operate. So from here we go to the Dead Sea, and we talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. They love those. They have come up a couple of times during the seasons, but then they focus in on the Book of Enoch that descended on Mount Hermon, according to the talking head, Mr. Barnes.
So the Book of Enoch is a biblical book that did not make it into the canon as we have it for most Christians. Most Christians, so the Hebrew Bible consists of a lot of different books, and at some point, someone had to select which books make it into the fixed canon, which ones are going to be in the Hebrew Bible and which ones are not. And so the Book of Enoch did not make it into the canon. So it's not actually a biblical book, but it is considered extra canonical, as in it is considered not divinely inspired. It's not God has not inspired someone to write these books or this book, but it's still an important philosophical and theological book. But it never claims to be a realistic book. It's not a historical document. It's a work of fiction. So the Book of Enoch tells about this guy, Enoch, who is visited by angels. He has a vision, and the angels take him up into heaven, and they show them kind of the different layers of heaven, and then he finally meets like in the upper layer, the divine beings who are sitting on these thrones. It's kind of what the book that inspired Dante's Inferno, if you're familiar with that. Kind of like an extraterrestrial being takes you on this trip, and then shows you, esoteric, mystical knowledge. But it's never meant to be a historical document of how the angels came to be on this realm. It was written probably around 300 before Christ, so it's not thousands years old. It wasn't there in the beginning of time. So even if what he says is true, he wrote it hundreds of years after the facts of the first so-called angels coming down to earth. So that's kind of the content of the book that they're trying to link here to. See, proof that aliens came to our planet and took this guy Enoch with them and to another planet, or I don't know where. They never really get into that. If people go taken up by angels, if that's like a UFO, how you call it, kidnapping or something, they don't really go into that, which could have been a topic for another episode.
Yeah, and from here we talk more about this ancient text. Of course, everything is ancient and therefore sounds more historical, authoritative, especially if you're...
I keep saying according to these ancient texts. And I'm like, it's not because it's an ancient text that it has more, indeed, like you said, more authority or it's more realistic, right? They had fairy tales in the ancient world. They had mythology. And so this Book of Enoch, I would definitely put under a work of fiction. So it's not because an ancient text says that angels came down that we just have to believe it. That's kind of a weird mind warp to make, in my opinion.
But they are excellent on doing that. Then we have von Däniken, who is an Austrian author, quite famous if you're not that familiar
that's
with him.
That's the only guy that I've heard about from this episode. I mean, I was also 15, 16 years old, and I was also interested in anything weird and archaeological and spooky and I don't know what. So I had read some of von Däniken's school books when I was in high school. Of course, then I grew up and learned the science and facts and all of that. But I had heard of the guy, yeah.
But he brings up his or one of his favorite topics, the horny spaceman who comes down to Earth and ravaging all the human women, because why wouldn't they, I assume? He is never clear, but he claims that Enoch never calls the angels gods, which might be true because I don't think Enoch would call an angel God, but he calls them guardians of the sky or watchmen. Do you think?
Well, they're sort of guardians of the heavenly realms, right? So they're the doormen and the watchmen of the different realms of heaven. So that would make sense. But yeah, the idea. So at this point, they get to the beginning of the Hebrew Bible, where they're like, okay, in the beginning, the times, the angels came down, and then they were the fallen angels, and the fallen angels mated with women, and then they had offspring, and then that became the giants, the Nephilim, etc., etc. And she's like, so is his idea that we're all descendants of aliens? Doesn't really.
That's the main idea of ancient aliens. Or there are two categories. So we have the panspermia theory. So we as a species come from another planet totally. So we are the aliens all along.
But so to me, the claim that so then the claim is these aliens came to our planet and were so attracted by the human women that they couldn't help themselves.
No, not the human women, the Cro-Magnon women. They come here, they found the Neanderthal, the Homo habilis, the monkey.
Well, if you believe in evolution, right? Wouldn't they not believe in evolution and they're already like full-blown Homo sapiens? If you would follow that idea. In any case, I always find it very strange because if I see how aliens are portrayed from people who said that they have been abducted by aliens, they're these like little gray men, right? Or little green men. But let's say that you go to their planet. Would you be so attracted to them that you can't stop yourself from having sex with them? You don't know how these aliens look like. I doubted that they looked anything like human beings. Like I don't think I would be sexually attracted to most of what I have seen in these alien movies. So kind of is a weird idea that you would be sexually attracted to this other species that you don't yourself look like. But okay, that's the premise. That's the premise. We're just biological creatures. We can't help ourselves. They just had to have sex with this woman. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, the horny spaceman theory, and then you have the gene splicing theory. Also, there's a couple of different versions of this, but anyway, let's stick with the angels for now because they come in and they're talking about the Nephilim for a little bit, where again Giorgio thinks that were they giants or were they aliens, basically. I think his theory is that, again, Giorgio Tsoukalos is one of those who believes that people can't describe things with words if they don't know what it is. So therefore they would exchange alien for a Nephilim and vice versa, and therefore we haven't found any giant fossil bones because aliens don't leave bones or something, or they just go and die off planet.
As you do. So even though there is this offspring, this Nephilim, which they believe are aliens, then they wouldn't die on our planet when they die?
I'm not sure what he thinks, but his theory was something like that. Because why wouldn't we have found giant bones yet? You're wondering in your nose about the ancient astronaut theories.
Right, because they keep saying according to ancient astronaut theories. And like I said, this is the first time that I'm actually watching this show, so probably they say that a lot. But I'm like, what is an ancient astronaut theorist and how do you become one?
Buy one of Van Daniken's books, and then you just copy what he writes in your new book.
Okay. I see. So that's your credential then.
That's your credential. Or you read Zechariah Sitchin, who claims to have known all the ancient languages but haven't been able to prove that, leading to a few quite interesting translation of ancient texts. But yeah, ancient astronaut theories, that's what Van Daniken called it in the 70s before it became ancient aliens.
I was just wondering what school they went to that they can claim that and in their captions that they're an ancient alien theorist. So then they move away from the Hebrew Bible and then they zoom out a little bit into other cultures in the Middle East and the ancient Near East.
And they start to talk about wings and how winged gods are across the globe, because can you imagine that someone would have fly and be a god with wings? That means that either they had all contact with each other, which is very unlikely because they didn't have any trains back then, or it was aliens. What is most logical about that?
I wonder. It's not about logic, it's about the truth, Fredrik. See, that's your problem. You're trying to be more logical than, see? Right. So then they talk about how winged gods have been portrayed around the globe in art historical pieces, right? So we have them in Sumerian art, we have them in Babylonian art, we have them in Egyptian art, but they don't really say around the globe. They stay in the ancient Near East. They don't talk about China or India or anything. No, they're just talking about the ancient Near East. And then I'm like, okay, but all of these cultures lived next to each other. All of them dominated each other at some point, right? The ancient Israelites went into Babylonian exile. They were dominated by the Assyrians. So it's clear that you can influence your ideas onto each other. It would only count if you have independent sources talking about the same phenomenon in their own words, but they have never been in contact with each other. Otherwise, you just have influence. Right. So the whole time that I was watching this episode, I was like, okay, let's replace this story with Harry Potter, right? The Harry Potter universe. Someone in the UK comes up with the Harry Potter story, which is a work of fiction, and then that starts to spread. And of course, hundreds and thousands of different cultures and people are going to talk about this phenomenon, but that doesn't mean that they have all encountered this independently. They have all read the books and they have seen the images and they have, seen the movies and visited the theme parks. And so, of course, you're going to have the same depiction of how a wizard looks like in different cultures or in different cartoons on TV or I don't know what, because they're all influencing each other. They're all borrowing ideas from each other. That is not evidence for, they all saw the same thing. No, they were being influenced by each other. So I don't think that's an argument at all. So we should just drop that off the table. Should push that away.
Yeah. And then they do play their favorite game, which is showing something from one of these ancient civilization and saying it's something that it's not. So we have Michael Carter, who seems to be some sort of priest. He's talking about a disc with wings. That's quite common in Babylonian Sumerian art. And what he's talking about is, of course, the sun disk from Assyria, usually associated with royalty if you look at different stelas and pillars. But of course you have a circle with wings, therefore UFO. And then we have our house folklorist. He has been in many of these episodes. I've never managed...
The Thomas Bullard, that's that guy? I liked him.
Yeah,
he was
Thomas
the only
Bullard.
one where I was like, see, that makes sense, what you're saying. I don't know why he's involved in this TV show, because everything that he said made sense to me, but
yeah, but he talked a little bit about demons. Pazuzu in the Mesopotamia, that's a demon that symbolized the west wind, if I remember correctly. And then we get to David Wilcock. He talks about Bible being the best documented evidence for extraterrestrials. It's just that we don't know how to interpret the Bible.
right. Which I was like, oh my God, that's such dangerous rhetoric. We just haven't learned how to read it. This is the same thing that Gnostics and people who are into New Age and whatever have been saying for thousands of years, right? The texts are there, but you need another level of consciousness to really understand what they're saying. It's codified. There's a mysterious layer underneath that we are just not trained to understand. But you could say that about anything. I mean, take your Harry Potter book and try to come up with a whole different layer of meaning and symbolism. You can find it in any text, there's as much fictional interpretation and fantasy going on there. Yeah,
the amount of fan art just speaks on how to, and fan theories and all of that kind of takes up their own life in the end. So yeah, I think the pop reference works well here too. You have warring factions within the Harry Potter universe, how you should interpret the books properly and all of that. So
I mean, that the any good story ever invented is about a battle between good and evil, right? It's always about the good guys and the superheroes and the bad guys and the villains and then overcoming difficulties. And that's just every good story, every good legend. I mean, if you want to put aliens in there, it's hard to see that link. But okay, that's what he said. That all refers to aliens and not to fictional characters or to historical characters. Like some people in the Hebrew Bible. But him saying that we don't know how to interpret these texts. There's a whole field within humanities called historical criticism, which is exactly trying to do that, trying to understand what is the context in which these stories were written, what was going on in society at that time that would have created a story like this. What were people talking about? What were they worried about? What kind of mythological stories were already out there? How is this a continuation of that? What were the cultural norms that people believed in? Certain expressions in the book that we don't always understand were clear at that time. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what did that expression actually mean? And often we find another text and that same expression happens with a little bit more context. And then we're like, okay, so it's used as that expression, that text. So it means it's the same thing here. So that is the meaning of this story, etc. That is exactly what scholars try to do with these texts, try to understand the deeper meaning of these stories. So to say that no one is doing that and they have the only truth in finding the hidden message, like, okay, sure.
But that's how they operate. That's why they don't give any reference when they speak about things in general. Even in their books, they are quite scarce where they find something. If you notice, they talk a lot about Enoch, but they never give any passage or it was, this chapter, this verse. Because if they do that, you will go...
Yeah, I mean, I totally fell for it when I was reading books of Van Duynik in high school, where they're like, that line in that text says this. And I'm like, oh my God, that line says this. But then you read two sentences further and they're like talking about something completely different. It's like totally taken out of context. I mean, you're reading the next sentence, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they're not talking about that. But that of course they leave out. They only pick, that one sentence that they need for their story.
And then they talk a little bit about hierarchies of the angels, and that's actually something I wasn't super aware of. I have believed until now when you corrected me, basically that the angels are something outside from the Bible, so it's more of the mystical text or within the Catholic canon, something like that. But apparently it's mentioned in the Hebrew Bible about the different hierarchies.
Yeah. So they're the seraphim, the cherubim, the angels, the archangels. So the two archangels that appear in the Hebrew Bible are Raphael and Michael. So there are angels that we know the names of, and then there are unknown angels, and then there are whole choirs of angels. And that kind of develops over time. And that probably comes back to their Dead Sea Scrolls, because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are a lot of esoteric texts or more theological texts talking about hosts of angels and working in this mystical heavenly temple, etc. So that angelology really gets expanded over times. But yeah, there are mentions of angels already in Genesis, as for example, the one who guards the Temple of Eden is an angel. So they do appear in not frequently, but there are some mentions of different kinds of angels in the Hebrew Bible.
And then we come to my favorite part in this episode, where Van Daniken says the quiet part out loud. So he says,
if you change a few words in the old text, a few key words, you change the sense of the old text. It's all not coincidence. It was on purpose.
Van Daniken, who by accident admitted to making things up in his books, and is known to, as he called it, take some artistic liberties in his factual textbooks. Maybe you shouldn't say that on TV.
Right. I was like, what? I don't understand what you're trying to say here. If you change a few words in the old texts, you change the sense of old text. I'm like, yes, okay. And your point is like
that if you switch angels to...
Okay, but then you can make a text say anything. If you change a few words in the Harry Potter universe, it's no longer about wizards, but it's about aliens. Okay, yeah, you can do that. But then what's the point of the whole... I'm not quite sure what they're trying to say here.
No, but I think What they want to say is that look how easy it would be to put an alien and everything works just fine. It's because they meant alien but wrote angel, I guess. But as you say, if you can change any word as you please in a text, the whole point of the text becomes useless. And
That was the end of part 1, the introduction. Ton, ton, ton.
and we open up on the Guardians, which is we start with recapping the story of Lot's wife, or basically we recap the ancient aliens story of Lot's wife, because they say something like, how would Lot know that they were angels that came to him if they looked like any other person? They are ignoring half the story because there's more to it than they just come there to say, Lot, you should get out before God smites the whole town.
Right. So this is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So Lot and his family lives in Sodom, and God is going to destroy the city because there's too many sinners in there. And so the angels travel to Sodom and they encounter Lot, and they warn him that this is going to happen and that they should leave the town before the town gets destroyed. Basically, that's the story. And then they say, okay, well, they knew that they were angels because they must have looked differently. So clearly they were aliens because aliens also look differently.
Something like that, yeah.
But then they also make the point, and on top of that, they were trying to help Lot. So these angels, these aliens come to our planet to help us.
Yeah, and or not us in general, but Lot specifically. So they were just there to get him out of the town with his family. But the reason why he got out was basically because he were nice to them and offered up their house. And when the crowd comes to,
they want to sleep with the visitors. And that's the story, right?
Yeah.
Sodom is being accused of being sodomites, right? Of being homosexuals. And so they portray in the Bible that they're so lustrous that they see these strange men come in and they're like, new flesh. And they knock on the door and they want to have intercourse with these visitors. And Lot says, no, here are my virgin daughters, have them instead. What a nice fella.
Yeah, very generous. And due to that, the angels decide to take Lot and, drag him basically out of the city. So again, not really what they want to convey here. And they show these, or what I interpreted as black metal angel statues, the dark with very chanting music.
First by images of angels in statues and in paintings from around the world that they probably found on Google search. And they just put into the episode, often accompanied by some chants, some Gregorian chants and dark, ominous music to give us a sense of we should be very scared of these angels, I guess.
I think here they want to move that there's a fallen race of angels, the Watchers that teach Enoch a bunch of things.
Yes, so Enoch gets educated in this sort of esoteric knowledge, which includes information on the right calendar, and so that's very important for ancient Judaism because you have to know when to do the right rituals and celebrate Shabbat and such. So he gets like the correct calendar to follow from the angels. So that's that kind of information.
And also how to make weapons. I looked that part up as calendars, weapons, and how to paint your eyes, because that's important things to know, especially from the fallen. So they invented space-time and go to Earth to teach people how to use mascara and...
Right, because time after time they come back and they say like, the aliens are here to help us and to move us forward throughout history and to like make us become a better species. But you and I wrote down on our notes like, well, wouldn't they like explain proper hygiene instead and maybe give us medication, and like wouldn't that help us more than
or how to make a sword? Yeah, think that people will be more happy about germ theory than mascara theory in the end of the day. But who am I? I haven't invented the warp speed yet, so
right. Maybe they have different priorities on their planet, Fredrik. You don't know.
No, that's the whole point. We're just asking a bunch of what if questions and show a bunch of stock photos. From there, we quickly pivot to something I didn't expect at all, because if you're familiar with Ancient Aliens, you might or understand that they are highly racist, so that they bring up Islam now. It was a bit jaw-dropping for me, at least. I did not count it. They don't talk a lot about it, but they talk about the notion about two angels, one on each side of the shoulder, taking notes, which is a thing in Islam. So if you go to Surah 50, verse 16 to 18, they are mentioned, and also later as noble writers. And my Arabic is non-existent. I barely speak Swedish, so they're called Kirman Katibin. I'm sorry to that lonely Iranian listener that I have. I'm very sorry. Well, they one write all the good deeds, the one write all the bad, and then in the end, God, Allah will use this to judge people on the day of judgment. To the Tobit and the first mention of a named angel or a guardian angel, I didn't really understand.
So now we're moving back to the
the
Hebrew
story
Bible,
here.
right?
Yeah.
So now we're getting to the book of Tobit, which is also not in the official Bible used by Protestants. But the book of Tobit is a very entertaining story, and I assign it to my students in class a lot. It's a story about Tobit. He lives abroad, so he doesn't live in Israel, Palestine. He lives in exile, but he's trying to stay faithful, true to God in this foreign culture. And so he is being lauded as like he buries the deceased people, which you should do according to Jewish law. And his son, so his son Tobias respects his dad and his parents, which you should do according to Jewish law. And then there's this crazy story about how there is a woman in another village, and she's trying to find a husband, and she's been marrying guys, and they all die on their wedding night. Every single time that she marries a guy, they die on their wedding night. So she has a bit of a problem. And then Tobit also has a problem that he needs to have some money, and he sends his son to that village by coincidence to go fetch that money. And on the trip, he doesn't know exactly where that village is. There's this guide that comes and helps him, and that is, of course, an angel, the angel Raphael. And so the angel helps him to get to that village. And then he meets the girl, and apparently there was a curse by a demon or a fallen angel, whatever you want to call it, on the girl. And Raphael helps to do a magical act using fish guts to get the curse lifted. And then the son marries the woman, and he does not die overnight, and they live happily ever after. It's kind of the story.
Yeah, I didn't really understand. I think it's that there was guardian angels and how they interfered with their life, the ancient aliens were after. But yeah, they didn't...
Right, so this is another example of how aliens have come down in the past to help us and to protect us, etc. But again, this is a story. This is a book of fiction. No one claims that this is a historical event that actually happened. I mean, it's full of fantastical elements. And the book itself has a lot of mistakes in it, as in geographical mistakes. It was clearly written hundreds of years after the time in which the story says it took place. So it's referring to place names that didn't exist yet at that time, or to names of kings that are just wrong if you would calculate the calendars. So it's clearly a made-up story. Let's say we are writing a story about England in the 15th century, but we don't know a lot about England, so we put in a couple of names like London and King Arthur and whatever all together. It doesn't really make sense. But so that's the story. So no one claims that this actually happened, and this angel actually came and visited this dude named Tobit, and all of this happened. But they use it as an example of like, another story that was written down from ancient times about an event that happened to them, basically.
And they talk a little about the end times in the book of Revelations, and because they like to have the theme that there's good aliens, bad aliens, and they are warring with each other. That's why they leave so much evidence behind. But at the same time, they don't, because they are warring, so they, explode and go up in smoke. From here, we move on to talk about, the physiology of angels and wings of angels.
The scientific research behind the angel.
The scientific explanations. And we open up on the Acts of Apostles. Again, they don't give you what part of the book, but with some Googling and a handy Bible, I figure out it's 12, 6 to 11. And didn't get the feeling that they told the original version, because we have Paul being imprisoned in Rome. And is it one alien or two aliens or angels that they talk about? I think it's one that all of a sudden just show up front of Paul because everybody is asleep.
No, it's Peter. It's a story of Peter.
Ah,
So we're in
I wrote Paul.
Palestine.
Yeah.
Yes. That's not correct. It's a story about Peter. So Paul is already. This is a story from the New Testament after Jesus had been crucified and all of that. So we're after that time, and Paul is away on missionary travels, and Peter is behind, right? He's supposed to start the Church of Jesus. And so he is arrested for being a follower of Jesus. And so he is the one in prison being guarded by soldiers. Yeah. So that's the story, the background. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the angel appears and opening up all the doors and, bussing him out of their Hollywood movie style, it seems like, with some sleeping guns. And as you're hinting at, it's not really the full story.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very short story, right? It talks about how Peter is imprisoned, and all of a sudden an angel appears to him, and the angel says, put back on your clothes, because clearly he wasn't fully clothed. And his shackles, his chains fall off his wrists. And he said, okay, I'm going to lead you out. And so he opens the prison door, and they manage to get past the guards and then come in front of the big gate of the prison, and that opens as well. And they go out, and then the angel disappears. And so that's the mythological story of how Peter came to be from being arrested by King Herod for following Jesus, but then was in the end still able to go out there and talk about Jesus because he's no longer in prison.
And from here we move on to Michael Carter, the Revenant, who talks about the similarities between alien visitations and visitation by angels. Of course, you sleep and then you wake up in strange places, knowing the time, which could be explained by sleep paralysis also. But Michael Cremo, also one very common fella in this show, chimes in that all these angel accounts that we hear about in modern times, in ancient times, are real historical events because they are written down. Why would somebody lie about this? Come on.
He just says it as another firm statement. It's a statement. These accounts are real historical events because they are presented that way. And I'm like, okay, well, of course, that makes them much more real then, because they were presented in a realistic way. They are realistic. Oh, yeah, of course. Sure, I'll follow that. Mm-hmm.
And then you bring up that there's some 5 angel visitation in 800 years.
Right, because they say, so angels have been, or aliens have been constantly helping us out and move the earth along. They have been constant visitors, helping history to where we are. I'm like, constant? Really? Are there? How many visitations were there? Like 5 visitations in like 800 years of the Hebrew Bible? Not really constant. And again, they seem to be helping Christianity along. How is freeing Peter helping the world, unless you think that Christianity is helping the world, to be a very theological way of looking at it? They really wanted Christianity to exist. Is that the point of these aliens? Okay.
It will be a later episode, but yes, Jesus was an alien.
I should have known. Of course.
Don't worry, Tina. We will get there, but that's a later episode.
And then we get to my favorite part. It's about the scientific analysis of the wings of angels. Ton, ton, ton.
Yes, the literal wings of angels, because you need to fly, and therefore you need wings. They talk a little bit how would people back then know that there was something special without them if they didn't have wings? So again, they go back to, how they painted angels in the early time, but they skip over the part where angels wasn't depicted with wings, because that's a later art historian phenomenon, as I've understood it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, because on the one hand, they say a couple of times, like, Yeah, these angels they didn't have wings. They looked like aliens without wings. But then on the other hand, they say, well, they only recognized them in the Hebrew Bible because they had wings, and so they clearly were not human. I'm like, okay, but you have to make up your mind here. Did they or did they not have wings? They seem to be confused themselves.
They tend to do that a lot. Then we get to the really good stuff that you're fishing after here.
Religious tradition has perpetuated the notion of bird-like wings to explain an angel's mode of travel. But is such a concept even scientifically plausible?
Because that's the important thing here. We don't want to wonder if, well, angels are real. No, we're going to focus in. But can they really fly with wings on their back?
I was so confused with it. I'm like, why is this relevant at all? So then they go to this university that has done a study of like how the wings should be moving and how heavy a body can maximum be to have these wings that fly in a certain way. And I'm like, why does this matter at all? They're aliens. They maybe weighed 1 kilo. Who knows? They didn't have physical bodies, I think. So, okay.
No, but they're, as you're saying, they're spending quite a lot of time going into, but it's impossible if they, had bird wings, because if you fly like this up and down, you don't get any lift. You need to have it like the birds, horizontal, and then they end up, but we are too heavy anyway, so people can't fly with wings like that. So why have we spent all this time talking about wings on?
Also, they kind of assume, because they talk about like these angels or aliens would have one set of wings on the top of their back coming out of their shoulders. But that is never described in the Hebrew Bible or any of these ancient texts about where the wings were on the body. Were they coming out of their heads or out of their feet, or how many pairs there are? Because I found a quote from the Quran that they said there were angel messages with wings, 2 or 3 or 4 pairs. So the Quran says that maybe there were multiple pairs of wings on these people. And then they keep showing images of angels depicted in modern or medieval statues and paintings as evidence of this is how it looked like. So it must be true that they have that kind of body. But these are, of course, all human interpretations based on text that has nothing. The Hebrew Bible didn't come with a set of drawings showing how these wings and things look like. I was just so confused. There are many different ways of flying. I mean, Harry Potter flies on a broomstick and Superman flies, I don't know how, straight up.
We're going to move back to what I mentioned in the beginning here, because Georgiou chimes in claiming that it's never depicted how they fly, and if they do it, they just come down from heavens. And then we go to jetpacks, because again, Georgiou Tsoukalos, he have this notion that I mentioned before, that ancient people can't describe things with the words that they have. Therefore, they invent things like dragons and wings and angels, because they didn't see wings, they saw jetpacks, because alien had jetpacks. And then we spend quite some time talking about jetpacks.
About the invention of jetpacks and how they work and how... Wow. So, okay, so we're getting away from they didn't recognize the aliens or angels because of wings, which they said earlier. Okay, we're scrapping that. Now they had jetpacks. Like, but why are they flying around with jetpacks if they're this advanced race of aliens? Can you see them sweeping around the universe, like the universum? Through the atmosphere with a jetpack, flying for months from planet to planet. I just had the most ridiculous images in my head. I'm like, what is this?
Or they have the mothership and then they just beam up and down, instead of having the teleportation apparatus, they have jetpacks from the spaceship.
I mean, we are not very advanced compared to these aliens, according to them. And we do better than jetpacks. We have flights that actually drop us down.
Yeah.
We don't have to jump out with a parachute from the sky trying to make it to the ground with a jetpack.
No, and then they talk a lot about the vertical position, jetpacks in generals, and yeah, you bring up chariots, but the chariots is, again, if you don't speak ancient alien language, there's, again, they can't describe what they're seeing with words, so they made up things that they know, such as chariots.
Well, yeah, but they talk about chariots a lot in the Hebrew Bible, including in the book of Enoch. There's a chariot of fire in which they sit on. There are winged creatures, and they talk about so they have the word, but that was coincidentally left out of their story.
They are really trying here to make the angels look evil for some reason. They move on to talk about, because now we talked about some jetpacks, made one producer very happy because maybe he really loved jetpacks. I don't know. It felt like it. But we are moving on to talk about this Abraham story, how he was supposed to sacrifice Isaac, and that convention religion thinks it's just a test, to test Abraham's faith, because the God in the Old Testament doesn't come off as a jealous God who killing people for even the smallest little thing.
He said clearly that could not have been God ordering him to do that. What kind of God would do that? Have you read the Hebrew Bible? It's full of he just killed an entire village of Sodom. I don't think that's too much to ask of the Jewish God to okay. But yeah, at this point, I was like, wow, now they're going to talk about God and trying to dispute the Hebrew Bible. Like, ooh, tricky. Now you're going to get all the evangelical Christians against you and the Jews and other religious people.
Somehow they managed to stay out of issues there. Maybe it will come one day, but Giorgio, he says that no God would ask people to do like this. No, it's one of those evil aliens that's hiding in the bushes and telling Abraham to do this. And luckily some good angel come and, stopped stopped all of this madness.
Ooh. But now you're doubting, the whole Hebrew Bible at this point. Like, I don't know if I would dare to go that far.
And we have a wicked raider that, again, clearly haven't read the Bible, saying something like, if an angel were to tell me I need to sacrifice my son, I would ask for some ID.
That's exactly how it went in the old days. If God talked to you, like, well, can I see some ID here first, God, before I follow your commandments? Always a good thing to doubt God. Always a good thing. Yep.
So Philip Coppens, your countryman, comes in, basically repeats the whole, why would God demand human sacrifice when he doesn't demand it anywhere else in the Bible, except for, Jesus.
Right. Right.
And all that. But yeah, the aliens wanted to prank us, or the bad aliens wanted to prank us, and the good alien steps in. And they then wants to fill out some time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have no idea why they bring up the jinn.
No, me neither. And I'm not an...
They bring up a cave called the Majlis al-Jinn, meeting place of the jinn. One of these times I felt, okay, they have short on 5 minutes, need to fill up some time.
So like, what other angels do we have somewhere in culture and history? Yeah, Muslims also have some angels. Let's put those in. Okay, good.
Yeah, the jinn is an interesting topic. Usually they are depicted as evil, but you have good jinns too. They don't really go into that much details, but on the screen we see Akkadian winged genies, and I felt quite amazed that they didn't call this Anunnaki, because they usually want to connect these depictions with the four-winged creatures with the pine cones, sometimes the bird beaks, with the Anunnaki, because the Anunnaki is the alien space race that gave everybody life.
Oh, okay, I see.
And again, they show winged creatures, but these have 4 wings if you would look closely on this. But from here we move to ultra-terrestrials, because extraterrestrial...
I think you skipped a step, because I also think that one of the reasons why they wanted to bring up the jinn is because they want to talk about the rubbing the oil lamp, the Aladdin
lamp
story of getting the genie out of the bottle. And then they're like, well, maybe another way of these angels or the aliens to come and visit us is through holograms. And so they didn't have the words to explain a hologram. So they just said a genie comes out of this device. And that's like an angel that comes out of this ancient artifact. Something like that, right?
Yeah, or something. Yes, to what you're saying, but I'm not sure if there's, they saw the angel with the hologram phone, or if they found the hologram phone and picked it up and, randomly called some ET who was very surprised. I'm not sure. But
sure they'll do a future episode about time travel and how like these bottles with gins were actually modern devices that they used to like have hologram images from the modern times come and depict stuff.
Well, they have a theory that we are time travel space aliens, so
okay, and then they move on to the ultra-terrestrials.
Yeah, because extra is never enough. We have the supreme terrestrials and Jason Martell, who always had these fanciful claims, says that, we all know that we all vibrate in three-dimensional space at a certain frequency. I'm not sure what they're hinting at.
I mean, we all know that, Fredrik. Jesus. I mean, I wrote that like kindergarten. Of course, we vibrate in three-dimensional space at a certain frequency. Jesus, that's like basic knowledge. Come on.
Well, in Sweden, the only reason we vibrate is because it's cold outside. So maybe we just don't notice it as. But yeah, ultra-terrestrial is some weird three-dimensional creature that would explain all supernatural creatures, because
right, these are like creatures that live among us, but they vibrate at a different frequency, so we cannot normally, I guess, see them or feel them. Only when they sort of switch their frequency to one that we can feel or see, and that's how sometimes these aliens will pop up and sometimes don't, kind of thing.
And it feels like they decide on a topic and then they try to find as much things about it. So somebody in the production team says, angels or aliens, and then they go and find some tired researcher who just trying to find 40 minutes of materials on the topic.
And also this thing, and also this thing. So it all makes sense. Okay.
Then they move on to make some seriously dangerous claims, talk about mental disorders, and that people who hear voices or having mental issues, they hear literal aliens. So they bring up Son of Sam, Herbert Mullin, I forget his first name, but the Applewhite from Heaven's Gate, saying that all of these heard people or heard voices, and of course, it's not mental disorder, it's aliens that whispers in their ears.
To those different frequencies, and so they can hear them or something. Yeah.
And you bring up that Son of Sam even admitted that he made it all.
Yeah, you should watch the show Mindhunters. I don't know if you have. It's a really good show. It's about the start of researchers researching serial killers. So the very invention of the word serial killer by this special department of the FBI. And then they go around and they interview serial killers in different prisons, trying to understand the psychological profile of these people, et cetera, et cetera. So in the show, they actually also go and visit Son of Sam, who claims that he was influenced by a demon dog to kill people. But then years later, of course, after this show premiered, he has admitted that he just made it all up.
Yeah, I like that show. I keep mixing it up with another one of those. But saying that people with mental disorders or mental illness, what they hear is real, that's...
Blame anything on like, aliens made me do it. Kind of reminds me of the story where like a lot of, like, there have been these cases where American, mostly like politicians, evangelicals who have cheated on their wives or who have abused women or whatever will then go publicly and say, I'm sorry, it was just like Satan took over or the demons made me do it.
You wonder who the narrator is. And that's a fella who is named Robert Clothworthy. Are you familiar with the StarCraft games?
Not entirely. I don't think so.
No, but he's a character in there, Jim Raynor. He's in Grand Theft Auto 5 and things like that. So he's quite busy. He's one of those I can't really place. I've found some interviews with him, and then it's more, the political correct, always up to the audience to, the term for themselves, sort of, hey, I want to keep my job, don't ask me these type of questions.
Like, who can go out on that TV show and like say with a straight face, like all these ridiculous statements that they make, or these dangerous statements that they make? I'm like, don't you feel some sort of moral obligation to not put those ideas out there?
Yeah, he goes on to saying that this is every actor's dream job because they have lost for a while and they are 18 season counting. So, of course, he should be blessed. But if you look him up on his Twitter, he posts things, alien related news that's not related to the show.
Oh,
So I think he is one of those that he might not be a believer, but he has so much financial gain in it now that he won't come out and say something against it.
right.
Just as I don't think Giorgio Tsoukalos or Van Daniken really believe these type of things. But for example, if we would look at your countryman Philip Coppens, I think he is a believer, while Giorgio and Van Daniken is more, it puts them in the limelight and it puts money in their pockets. Those three aren't consistent in their claims. They will say whatever as long as they are in front of the camera or get a book deal out of it.
Right. I mean, yeah, there were already a lot of internal contradictions in this episode. Clearly, they will just say whatever they feel like in that moment that would fit their theory that they're talking about. So,
but yeah, there's different levels of them as I've started to gain. So there's the believers, but they are always consistent. They stay on that topic and they don't wander all over, while some others, they, oh, give me money, I tell you whatever you want to hear, sort of way.
But yeah, it especially came up to me because we were talking about these dangerous statements. That I was like, wow, how can you just like put that out there and like look yourself in the mirror? Like, this could have consequences. This is not just like fun entertainment. This could actually have whatever.
Yeah, it could lead to somebody who doesn't seek treatment for something because, the TV said it was real. But yeah, it's a bit scary. And we're getting to the last part, Angels of Roswell. Again, we open up on Mount Hermon because it's been the important topic, and Book of Enoch comes up again because now we want to tie everything together, and they talk about something like 200 fallen angels. I'm not really sure, but Bill Barnes thinks that the Middle East is an alien hotspot due to all the portals.
Right. So he says like, oh, we have so many examples in the Middle East of these aliens. We have them in Mesopotamian and Babylonian, Assyria. Clearly the Middle East is a hot spot for ancient aliens. I'm like, okay, but isn't that because you only looked at that part of the world? Like, clearly we live in a Western Christian world, right? Our origin stories lay in the Middle East. This is something that we are most familiar with. Okay, you mentioned the Quran a couple of times, like 1 or 2 minutes, but that's also Middle East. But you didn't talk anything at all about ancient China or ancient India or other places. So you haven't even looked at other cultures or mythologies. So
in this case, because they wouldn't fit.
Right. Probably.
I can't really remember much wings and the angel concepts in Mesoamerican folklore or Native American or Chinese, because as you said previously, it's all within the context of the Mediterranean and civilizations that interact with each other and exchanging ideas. Of course, you will have angel stories in the Middle East. But as you clearly know, Mount Hermon is on the 33rd parallel. And do you know what the on the other side of the globe on the 33rd parallel is too?
No, I do not,
Well,
Fredrik. Tell me.
It's Roswell in New Mexico.
Well, that cannot be a coincidence. Wow.
No, and there, according to the show, if you draw a line exactly across the globe, you will, have a straight line. And they love to make that claim. It never works out for them because now you can look up the coordinates and sure, they are both on 33 parallel, but they are, wide from each other. So you don't get a straight line. It's more, the edge. In the last episode, they tried this with a bunch of French cities, claiming, if you start in Calais and go south, you get a straight line. So, of course, you don't get a straight line.
Or on a flattened map.
On a flattened map. So the line, when I looked them up, went all across all across France, and I even had to go to some French friends because I couldn't find some villages, and it was because those villages don't exist. So they make up villages to get a straight line, and it didn't work out for them anyway. But did you know that if you have Mount Hermon and go just on the other side of the globe, you get Roswell? Isn't that strange? Did you know that?
I did not. That cannot be coincidence that one other place that we also know aliens were. So I actually went to Roswell, Fredrik, last year. I went on a personal holiday to New Mexico and I wanted to go to Roswell. But Roswell is pretty big. It's actually a giant region. And so we went downtown and we visited like the touristy stuff, the little alien center that they have there and the museums and the gift shop and whatever. But then we wanted to go to the crash site. And actually the crash site is like over 100 kilometers away. It's 120 kilometers away from downtown Roswell. It's not even close to the city of Roswell. It's closer to another city called Corona in New Mexico. Yeah. New Mexico is giant. So if they're claiming that the crash site of the aliens was on the same line as Mount Hermon, that claim is, you can just throw that out because it was not. It was like 40 or 45 parallel north. So they must have just opened Google Maps or whatever and just like looked whatever lays on the world on that line and find a city that could have anything to do with aliens and then came up with Roswell, but it's not. It's not the crash site. And then my husband this morning said, well, they crashed, they wanted to go to Roswell. They just didn't make it all the way to there. Clearly, they meant to land on the 33rd. They just didn't make it that far.
They intended to, and the claim is also that it's the polar opposite between them, which it's not. If you have the polar opposite of Mount Hermon, you end up in the Pacific.
Right, because polar opposite, you also have to go like diagonally across the globe, right? Not just, on the same line. So that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you're always going to find some numbers that link up. Come on.
Without any parameters, context, want to line up something, two things will sooner or later line up.
I mean, we have built this world so full of stuff that two things will line up at some point if you look hard enough. Yeah.
And isn't that picky with time periods or, connections? But, well, we have Mr. Wilcup ending it saying that we should wake up. And maybe he should wake up.
It was a wild ride, Fredrik. It took me a couple of days trying to process everything that I saw. What I mostly find, I mean, I guess it's a good tactic for them. It's that it's so random. They go from one thing to the other without building up. If this was like an essay that one of my students would write, I would say there's a lot of good ideas in there, but you have to build up your argument, right? You have to start from somewhere and then give me evidence piece A, evidence piece B, then put them together and then come to a conclusion. There's no line in this episode. It goes from one thing to another thing without any connections. And then the end, they're like, ta-da, and we showed all the evidence. Now you believe it. And I'm
like, I have our theory, our pet theory is to keep all the stoned people entertained.
I'll try that next time.
So, if you don't have the quick things happen, the rapid things, they will lose interest. Or it is the whole, well, we select a topic and then we try to fill the episode with everything. And when you do it like that, you, of course, get some issues.
Very lazy editing. Let's talk 1 minute about this, 2 minutes about this, 5 minutes about this, end of the episode.
And I can tell you that production-wise, this is better than season 1. A lot better. And the episode in season 1 was 1.5 hours a piece. In the same manner, the quick shops, nothing really ties together, and 1.5 hours of that. Tine, if people would want to hear more from you or read more from you, where should they go?
I would just say Google my name. It really is the easiest. I'm on Twitter. I have a website. I also have my dissertation. So I wrote my dissertation on coin hoards found in ancient synagogues in Israel, looking at the magical aspects of coin hoard from a scientific point of view. Do have to warn you, it has nothing like ancient aliens in it.
No aliens.
No, and that is, the website is ancientsynagoguecoins.com. So ancientsynagoguecoins, one word.com. And then you'll find all the information there. And that's it.
Fantastic. It was a great time speaking with you, and I will let you go and try to forget the whole experience now as good as you can.
Thank you, Fredrik.
Again, a big thank you to Dr. Tine Rassalle. You should really go and look up her projects, and if you are in need of a biblical archaeologist, well, you know now where to look for one. If you like a good silver hoard, and who doesn't, you should really look into Tine's dissertation on ancient synagogue coins. All her links and projects can be found on this week's show notes. Remember to leave a positive review anywhere you can, such as iTunes, Spotify, or to your friend at the Trench. I would also recommend you to visit diggingupancientaliens.com to find more info about me and the podcast. You can also find me on most social media sites, and if you have comments, corrections, or suggestions, or you're one of those persons who really wants to write one of those emails in all caps, you can find my contact info on the website. And on the website you will of course find all the sources and resources used to create this podcast. And you will also find further reading suggestions if you want to learn more about the subjects we bring up. The intro music was created by Alexander Nakarada, and our outro is made by Trallskruv, who will sing us out with their song Tinfoil Hat. Links to both these artists will be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep shoveling that science.
Sorry, if you hear it in the background, we're having a big thunderstorm for the moment in North Carolina. We can't help it. I closed the windows, no. But it's that loud. Sorry.
I thought your cat or something knocked something over.
No, it's literally, we're talking about aliens, and I don't think God is amused, or the aliens are amused. They're trying to interfere with our recording.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Remember that we have a subscription going on. You can become a patron or other subscriber for as little as $2.50 per episode. Go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support. That is, go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support to read more information and sign up right there.